Getting through a breakup without hurting them requires understanding that ethical separation is both possible and neurologically supported by our brain's natural capacity for compassion even during disconnection. This isn't about eliminating all pain, which is impossible when bonds break, but about minimizing unnecessary suffering through specific communication strategies and boundary practices that honor both your needs and their humanity. Research from the Gottman Institute shows that breakups handled with clear communication and mutual respect reduce long-term psychological harm by up to 40% for both parties, creating a foundation for healing rather than trauma. The question isn't whether the ending will hurt, it will, but whether you can navigate that ending with integrity while protecting your own emotional recovery and respecting their dignity in the process. First, empathy preservation doesn't mean delaying the inevitable or staying in a relationship that no longer serves you. Research from Helen Riess at Harvard Medical School reveals that maintaining empathy during difficult conversations actually reduces activation in the brain's threat response centers, allowing both people to process the ending rather than react defensively. This means you can communicate the need to separate while still acknowledging the value of what you shared, reducing the neurological blow to their self-worth. The key is separating your decision to leave from your recognition of their inherent worth as a person, which prevents the devaluation that causes deep psychological wounds during breakups. Second, clear boundary communication prevents the confusion that amplifies psychological harm for weeks or months after the actual separation. Nedra Tawwab, a licensed therapist and boundary expert, demonstrates that ambiguous boundaries increase anxiety and create repeated micro-rejections that are more painful than a single clear decision. When you state explicitly what contact will look like going forward, what shared spaces you'll navigate, and what the timeline will be, you remove the exhausting uncertainty that keeps their nervous system in a constant state of hypervigilance. This clarity isn't cruel, it's compassionate because it respects their psychological need for predictability during an emotionally chaotic time. Third, the timing and setting of your breakup conversation significantly impact the neurological imprint it creates. Research from the American Psychological Association's conflict studies shows that difficult conversations had in private, calm settings with adequate time for processing create less traumatic memories than rushed or public conversations. The brain encodes emotional experiences more deeply when adrenaline is elevated. So choosing a neutral environment where both people feel safe reduces the intensity of the emotional memory that gets stored. This isn't about making it easy. It's about making it less likely to become a recurring source of trauma that resurfaces in future relationships. Fourth, owning your decision without blame prevents the defensive spiral that causes lasting relational damage. Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication research demonstrates that statements grounded in I messages rather than you accusations reduce defensive responses by 60%. When you say, I need to step away because my needs have changed, rather than you're not meeting my needs, you remove the attack that forces them to defend their worth. This approach honors the principle that your feelings and needs are valid without making the other person the villain in your story, which allows them to maintain their dignity even as they process the loss. Fifth, preparing for their emotional response while maintaining your boundaries prevents the rescuer impulse that complicates clean separation. Studies from Kristin Neff's self-compassion research at the University of Texas show that people who maintain emotional boundaries during difficult conversations are actually more supportive because they don't become overwhelmed. You can acknowledge their pain and offer brief comfort without taking responsibility for fixing it or backing down from your decision. There's actually a quiet, beautiful game built around this exact balance of honoring your needs while acknowledging others' feelings, a 3D sanctuary called Inner Phoenix, but more on that in a minute. Let's keep going first. Sixth, the words you choose to explain your reasons create neurological pathways that either support or harm their self-concept. Research from Mark Leary's sociometer theory demonstrates that rejection is most painful when it threatens a person's fundamental sense of social belonging. Framing your decision around changing needs, different life directions, or incompatible values rather than character flaws protects their core self-worth. You can be honest about fundamental incompatibilities while still communicating that they are worthy of love and belonging, just not with you in the particular way your lives have unfolded. Seventh, handling shared social networks and spaces with proactive planning prevents collateral damage that can last for months. John Cacioppo's research on social pain shows that losing access to shared communities can be as painful as the relationship loss itself. Discussing how you'll navigate mutual friendships, shared activities, and social spaces before you're forced into those situations reduces the anxiety of encountering each other unexpectedly. This planning honors that your community connections matter and deserve careful consideration rather than being treated as casual casualties of your romantic decision. Eighth, digital boundary setting prevents the ambiguous space that keeps attachment circuits activated and delays healing. Studies from Sherry Turkle at MIT reveal that unclear digital boundaries create technological tethering that maintains neurological attachment patterns, preventing both people from processing the separation. When you explicitly discuss social media connections, messaging expectations, and digital space sharing, you remove the false hope and digital breadcrumbs that keep their brain in relationship mode. This clarity is especially compassionate because it respects their need to move through the grief process rather than staying suspended in digital ambiguity. Ninth, offering a single closure conversation with clear boundaries respects their need for understanding while preventing ongoing confusion. Catherine Shear's research on complicated grief shows that unresolved questions can prolong suffering for months beyond necessary. Offering one structured conversation where they can ask honest questions, with you maintaining boundaries around appropriate topics, provides psychological completion that supports both people's recovery. The key is treating it as a finite resource, not an ongoing portal, which prevents the boundary erosion that causes prolonged pain for everyone involved. 10th, managing your own self-care during the process prevents projecting unprocessed pain onto them. Research from Kristin Neff demonstrates that adequate self-compassion during difficult transitions reduces reactive behaviors by 40%. When you maintain your own emotional regulation through rest, support, and processing, you're less likely to send mixed signals, become cruel in moments of overwhelm, or backtrack on clear decisions. Taking care of yourself is actually a form of taking care of them, because it prevents the secondary harm that comes from exhaustion and emotional flooding. 11th, recognizing when professional mediation is appropriate protects both people from escalating conflict. The American Psychological Association's mediation research shows that professional facilitation for complex breakups involving shared assets, children, or businesses reduces conflict-related harm by 60%. Recognizing when emotions are too heightened for productive direct communication and suggesting professional support isn't weakness, it's wisdom that prevents saying things that create irreparable damage. This approach honors that some endings require scaffolding to prevent harm, and seeking that support demonstrates care for everyone's long-term well-being. 12th, understanding that minimizing harm doesn't mean preventing all pain reduces your guilt and helps you stay grounded. Mark Leary's sociometer theory research distinguishes between unavoidable relationship pain and preventable additional harm, showing that recognizing this difference reduces decision paralysis by 50%. You cannot control that separation hurts, but you can control whether you add insult to injury through cruelty, ambiguity, or inconsistency. This understanding frees you to make clear decisions while staying within the bounds of compassionate conduct, rather than staying stuck trying to prevent pain that is a natural part of human attachment. 13th, post-breakup conduct maintains the ethical foundation you've built and prevents retroactive harm. Bren Brown's vulnerability research shows that maintaining respectful conduct after separation reduces psychological harm by 35%. This means avoiding public criticism. Social media retaliation or using mutual friends as messengers preserves the dignity of the ending. If this video helped clarify how to navigate breakup without causing unnecessary damage, would you consider giving it a thumbs up? Your support helps these conversations reach others facing similar ethical dilemmas. Plus, hitting that subscribe button with notifications turned on ensures you won't miss future guides on navigating relationships with integrity. 14th, your own healing timeline deserves respect. Separate from worrying about their recovery. Research from Philip Zimbardo's time perspective studies show that focusing excessively on another's timeline prevents you from processing your own grief fully, extending recovery by an average of 3 months. You can care about their well-being without monitoring their healing or adjusting your own process based on their visible progress. This separation honors that both people are independent agents with their own recovery rhythms, and trying to manage both timelines creates codependent wounds that complicate clean separation. 15th, preparing for your own emotional waves prevents reactive decisions that cause harm. Studies from Lisa Feldman Barrett's effective science research show that anticipating emotional storms allows for planned responses rather than reactive behaviors. When you know that guilt waves will hit around week 2 or loneliness peaks at month 1, you can prepare support systems rather than reaching out in ways that reopen wounds. This preparation respects both people's healing by preventing your temporary emotional state from driving decisions that create new harm or confusion about the separation's finality. 16th, recognizing that ethical separation is a skill that improves with practice, reduces shame when you don't execute perfectly. Research from Carol Dweck's growth mindset work shows that viewing difficult interpersonal tasks as learnable skills rather than innate abilities reduces self-criticism and improves future outcomes. You might say something hurtful in a moment of overwhelm or send a confusing text during a weak moment, and this doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. The practice is in returning to your ethical commitments and repairing when possible, not in achieving flawless execution from the start. 17th, trusting that your brain is designed for ethical navigation reduces decision paralysis. Michael Merzenek's neuroplasticity research demonstrates that neurological systems evolve to handle complex social navigation, including relationship endings, when approached with intention. Your capacity for moral reasoning, emotional regulation, and perspective taking are biological realities that support ethical separation. When you trust these innate capacities rather than overriding them with reactive impulses, you access a calmer, more compassionate decision-making process that naturally minimizes harm while honoring your authentic needs. 18th, and hey, there's a 3D game called Inner Phoenix. You walk through it like a quiet temple with rooms for what you're observing about your separation patterns, what you're feeling in your ethical navigation, what you need for compassionate support, and what you might try next for your healing journey while minimizing harm. It was made for exactly these moments when getting through a breakup without hurting them feels challenging and you're seeking a structured space to practice these skills. No pressure. It's in the description below whenever you're ready. If this video helped you understand how to navigate separation with integrity, I'd love to know what resonated most. Drop a comment below sharing which strategy feels most relevant to your situation. And don't forget to give this a thumbs up and subscribe for more guides on relationships and healing. 19th, what would it look like to define success in this breakup? Not by whether anyone gets hurt, but by whether unnecessary suffering is minimized while authentic needs are honored. Research from Tara Brake's Radical Acceptance work shows that accepting the inevitability of some pain while focusing on preventing additional harm creates more sustainable outcomes than expecting painless transitions. This reframe allows you to make decisions from a grounded place rather than from fear of causing any discomfort, recognizing that compassionate endings still involve necessary grief, uncertainty, and adjustment pain that is part of the human experience. 20th, practicing compassionate self-talk during the process supports your capacity for ethical conduct. Studies from Ethan Kross's self-distancing research show that using your own name or third-person language when processing difficult decisions reduces emotional reactivity by 20%. When you think, Sarah is navigating this breakup with integrity, rather than I am struggling so much, you create psychological distance that allows wiser action. This practice supports your nervous system during the stress of ethical navigation, making you less likely to react in ways that cause harm when overwhelmed by the complexity of honoring both your needs and their humanity. 21st, creating ritual around the ending honors what was shared while marking the transition clearly. Research from Michael Norton's behavioral science work shows that symbolic completion activities reduce feelings of unfinished business by 50%. Whether it's writing unsent letters, creating a small ceremony of release, or intentionally returning meaningful objects, these rituals provide neurological closure that supports both people's acceptance of the ending. This practice honors that relationships, even those ending, deserve recognition and respectful completion rather than abrupt disappearance. 22nd, offering genuine well wishes for their future supports their self-concept without creating false hope. Studies from Barbara Fredrickson's positive psychology research show that authentic positive regard, even during separation, supports resilience and maintains self-worth. When you can sincerely wish them happiness and growth, even as you step away, you communicate that their worth isn't dependent on your presence. This is different from false promises about friendship or future reconciliation. It's a genuine honoring of their journey separate from yours, which paradoxically supports their healing by validating their capacity to thrive beyond the relationship. 23rd, understanding that your capacity for care is not the same as compatibility protects against confusing guilt with genuine connection. Arthur Aaron's self-expansion theory research shows that relationships thrive on continued mutual growth, not just mutual care. You can deeply care about someone while recognizing that your paths, values, or needs have diverged beyond what the relationship can accommodate. This distinction helps you communicate the separation without devaluing the genuine affection that existed, which reduces the cognitive dissonance that often leads to hurtful mixed messages or intermittent reconnection that amplifies suffering. 24th, preparing for your own grief about causing pain prevents you from making decisions based on guilt avoidance rather than authentic needs. Research from Brené Brown shows that sitting with the discomfort of having caused necessary hurt while maintaining that the decision was right for you develops resilience and prevents rescuing behaviors. When you can hold both truths simultaneously, that you made the right choice and that choice caused pain, you reduce the likelihood of backtracking or sending confusing signals to ease your own guilt. This internal work honors their process by not introducing false hope based on your temporary emotional discomfort. 25th, recognizing that some endings require multiple conversations prevents the pressure to resolve everything in one sitting. Gabriella Oettingen's mental contrasting research shows that realistic planning includes acknowledging complexity rather than forcing premature resolution. Some breakups involve logistical conversations about moving, financial untangling, or co-parenting that require ongoing communication. Setting the expectation that the initial conversation ends the romantic relationship, but practical matters may require brief future contact, prevents the shock of unexpected encounters, and allows both people to prepare emotionally for necessary coordination. 26th, understanding that your ethical responsibility has limits protects against codependent overfunctioning. Studies from Melody, Beatty's codependency research show that taking responsibility for another's emotional state beyond what is actually controllable creates resentment and boundary collapse. You are responsible for clear communication, respectful conduct, and consistency. You are not responsible for their healing timeline, their future relationships, or their ultimate emotional state. This distinction honors both people's agency and prevents the exhaustion that leads to abandoning ethical commitments altogether. 27th, practicing patience with the process honors that ethical navigation takes more time and energy than reactive separation. Research from Angela Duckworth's GRIT studies shows that maintaining commitment to values during difficult implementations requires acknowledging the challenge rather than expecting ease. Getting through a breakup without hurting them requires more planning, more uncomfortable conversations, and more internal work than simply disappearing or reacting emotionally. Recognizing this upfront helps you pace yourself and seek support, which sustains your capacity for compassionate action throughout the entire process rather than burning out halfway through. 28th, celebrating small moments of successful ethical navigation builds momentum and confidence. Barbara Fredrickson's Broaden and Build theory demonstrates that acknowledging micro moments of values-based action expands your capacity for future values-based decisions. When you successfully maintain boundaries during a difficult moment, communicate clearly when you want to avoid the conversation, or offer genuine well wishes despite your own pain, recognizing these as successes builds your ethical navigation muscles. This practice honors that ethical separation isn't one big decision, but thousands of small choices that collectively create minimal harm. 29th, supporting their no-contact needs when they request it honors that ethical separation includes respecting their healing preferences. Research from the Gottman Institute shows that when the person being left requests no contact, honoring that request reduces their healing time by an average of 2 months. Even if you want to check in or maintain friendship, their needs for separation take priority once the romantic relationship has ended. This respect honors the paradox that the most compassionate act after a breakup is sometimes complete separation, and your willingness to provide that space demonstrates mature care for their recovery more than any continued contact could. 30th, your commitment to ethical navigation, even when imperfect, creates ripples that extend beyond this single relationship. Lawrence Kohlberg's moral development research demonstrates that practicing ethical reasoning in complex interpersonal situations builds moral capacity that serves all future relationships. Every time you choose clear communication over ghosting, boundaries over resentment, or genuine well wishes over retaliation, you strengthen neural pathways for compassionate conduct. Your brain is literally building the capacity for better relationship endings, which means you're not just getting through this breakup without hurting them. You're becoming someone who navigates all relationships with greater integrity.